welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on something pretty ambitious, I think.
I'd say so. We're trying to synthesize a really vast amount of research, pulling together threads from some quite different fields.
Exactly. We've got leading neurologists, metabolic health experts, people working on trauma, even insights from palliative care. The aim is to build, well, a kind of a comprehensive blueprint for optimal living.
And that's crucial, isn't it? It's not just about adding years to your life, but adding life to those years.
Yeah.
That idea of health span.
Right. Boosting mental resilience, keeping cognitively sharp well into older age, and really moving past that old siloed thinking.
Where the mind and body are treated as completely separate entities, which of course they aren't.
So the mission today is to take all this, frankly, quite overwhelming information
It can be.
and turn it into something cohesive, something you can actually use. Actionable intelligence.
And hopefully reveal some surprising connections along the way, like that concept of evolutionary mismatch.
Ah, yes, the idea that genes, which were once protective.
Like APOE4.
Exactly. Protective against infection, starvation, things our ancestors faced constantly. But now, in our modern world, high stress, different diet, toxins.
Those same genes can actually increase our risk for things like cognitive decline. It's a real paradox.
It is a stark irony, really.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think the obvious place to start has to be the health crisis that looms large for so many. Cognitive decline, and specifically Alzheimer's. There's been a revolutionary rethink here.
Absolutely. The work of people like Dr. Dale Breedson and Dr. Richard Isaacson is fundamentally shifting the narrative, their core message. Alzheimer's isn't necessarily inevitable, and it's certainly not untreatable in the way we used to think.
That's a huge statement. So how are they approaching it differently?
Well, Dr. Breedson really hammers this point home. We have to stop seeing cognitive decline as a single disease you treat with a single pill. That's the old model.
The magic bullet approach. Exactly. He argues it needs to be approached much more like, say, complex surgery. Meticulous, personalized, looking at the whole system, not just reaching for the prescription pad.
That distinction, surgery versus prescription, feels really significant. It implies a much deeper level of intervention.
It does, and it leads straight into his famous analogy, the 36 holes in the roof.
Ah, yes, I've heard this one. Explain it for our listeners.
So the idea is, if your house roof has 36 holes and it's raining, patching just one hole isn't going to keep the house dry, is it?
No, of course not. The rain still pours in through the other 35.
Precisely. And Dr. Breedson argues that cognitive decline is like that. It's multifactorial. There could be up to 36 different factors: inflammation, toxins, hormonal imbalances, nutrient deficiencies, infections, vascular issues, you name it all, contributing to the rain flooding the brain.
So the traditional approach, searching for that one drug to fix the Alzheimer's hole, was fundamentally flawed because it ignored all the other potential leaks.
Utterly flawed. The systems biology approach that he and others champion says you must identify and address all the relevant holes for that individual patient.
It sounds incredibly complex.
It is complex, but it reflects the reality of the biology. The ultimate goal, biologically speaking, is to flip a switch in the brain.
Flip a switch.
Yes. Dr. Breedson explains that the brain has this protective mechanism. When it senses insults, toxins, inflammation, lack of crucial nutrients or growth factors, it shifts from a pro-connection mode, building and maintaining synapses,
All right. The connections between brain cells.
to a pro-protection mode. It starts downsizing, retracting synapses to protect itself from the ongoing assault. This is what leads to cognitive decline symptoms.
So the mission is to identify those insults, remove them, and basically coax the brain back into build mode instead of defend mode.
You've got it. Force the system back towards synaptic growth and connection.
And the results they're seeing with these multi-pronged protocols, they're really quite remarkable, aren't they? They challenge that old dogma that brain damage is permanent.
They absolutely do. The brain's resilience, its plasticity, seems far greater than we appreciated once you remove the underlying drivers of the damage. Dr. Breedson tells some incredible stories.
I remember one about a patient regaining languages.
That's right. A woman who, after just 5 months on his protocol, regained the ability to speak fluent Chinese and Russian languages she had completely lost access to as her cognition declined.
Wow. Just 5 months. Imagine regaining that part of yourself.
It's profound. And it shows the potential for genuine recovery, not just slowing the decline. And crucially, these gains aren't just limited to people caught very early.
You mean even later stage patients can see improvement?
Yes. He talks about another patient with posterior cortical atrophy, which is a particularly challenging form affecting vision and spatial awareness, even after 4 years on the protocol.
4 years is a long time to stick with something complex.
It shows incredible dedication. But this patient experienced a remarkable return of their 3D vision and, subsequently, regained the ability to read properly and use a computer again.
That's not just improving memory. That's restoring fundamental functions. It flies in the face of decades of medical teaching.
Completely. It underscores the power of continuously addressing those holes in the roof, no matter where the patient starts from. The potential for repair seems to persist.
Which brings us to Dr. Richard Isaacson's work, emphasizing that personalization. If there are potentially 36 factors, you can't possibly have a standard protocol.
Absolutely not. Dr. Isaacson confirmed this in his own trials. He found that, on average, patients in his studies received 21 different, highly specific interventions tailored precisely to their individual biochemistry and risk factors.
21. That really drives home the point about needing a surgical approach, as Dr. Bridson put it.
It does. And that kind of personalization demands data. You need to know what you're treating. This is where biomarkers become non-negotiable.
Like checking cholesterol for heart disease risk.
Exactly the analogy Dr. Isaacson uses. We accept that for heart health, so why not for brain health? Dr. Bridson advocates strongly for what he calls a cognoscopy.
A cognoscopy. Like a colonoscopy, but for the brain.
Sort of. It's a comprehensive assessment, including blood tests for key biomarkers. One he highlights is phosphorylated tau, or p-tau.
T-tau. Can you explain that simply?
Sure. Tau is a protein that normally helps stabilize structures inside brain cells. When it gets phosphorylated, meaning a phosphate group gets added chemically, it can start to clump together, forming tangles, which are one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's. Elevated p-tau in the blood can be an early warning sign, sometimes years before symptoms show.
So checking p-tau gives you a window into potential trouble brewing.
Precisely. And the recommendation is quite radical. Start checking markers like p-tau around age 35.
35. That seems very young.
It reflects the understanding that the disease process can begin decades before symptoms emerge. The idea is to get a baseline and then repeat the cognoscopy perhaps every 5 years. Track your trajectory.
So you can intervene much, much earlier if the numbers start moving in the wrong direction.
Exactly. Prevention or early reversal becomes far more achievable.
And the results they're getting with this personalized, biomarker-driven approach, it's causing a bit of a stir, isn't it? Challenging the old guard.
Oh, absolutely. Dr. Isaacson talks about the heresy of their findings, particularly the idea that the adult brain can actually grow. The established view for so long was that brain volume only shrinks with age and disease.
But his data shows otherwise.
Dramatically so. He shared the story of Simon, who was featured in a CNN documentary earlier this year, May 2024. Now, Simon has the APOE4 gene variant, which carries the highest genetic risk for Alzheimer's.
Okay, so genetically he's predisposed.
Highly predisposed. Yet, following Dr. Isaacson's personalized protocol, brain scans showed Simon's brain volume actually increased, not once, but twice over a 2-year period.
His brain grew, despite the APOE4 gene.
Yes. Measurable volumetric growth. And perhaps even more compelling, his levels of amyloid and tau, those problematic proteins which had been high, actually returned to normal ranges.
That's extraordinary. Objective proof of regeneration, challenging fundamental beliefs about brain aging.
It really throws down the gauntlet to the old research establishment. It suggests we have far more power to influence brain structure and health than previously thought.
And it's important to mention this isn't just theoretical research. People like Dr. Heather Sandison are putting these principles into practice.
Yes, her work is vital. She established Marama, which is an assisted living facility, but one designed specifically around implementing these comprehensive functional medicine protocols for residents with cognitive decline.
Making this cutting-edge, personalized approach accessible in a real-world care setting. That's crucial.
Absolutely. Taking it from the lab and the clinic into the community.
Okay, so we've established this new paradigm for understanding and intervening in cognitive decline. Personalized, multifactorial, aimed at regeneration. But none of that works if the brain doesn't have the right fuel.
Precisely. Energy is fundamental. Dr. Shahrukh Malik used a great analogy here. He describes the brain's ideal energy system as being like a hybrid car, a Prius maybe?
Meaning it can run on different fuel sources.
Exactly. It's designed to run efficiently on both glucose, sugar, and ketones, which are derived from fat breakdown.
A dual fuel tank.
A dual fuel tank. But here's the problem in many people with cognitive decline. Their metabolic flexibility is shot. They've lost the ability to use either fuel efficiently.
How so?
Well, they're often insulin resistant, which means their cells, including brain cells, don't respond properly to insulin, so glucose uptake is impaired. And simultaneously, their bodies struggle to produce and utilize ketones effectively. They're stuck.
So the hybrid engine is broken.
In effect, yes. And Dr. Malik points out this critical paradox in typical amnestic Alzheimer's, the type that primarily affects memory, even if the person has high blood sugar levels circulating in their body.
Which is common in insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes.
Right. Even then, their brain, particularly the memory center, the hippocampus, is effectively starving for energy.
Starving despite high blood sugar. How does that work?
It comes down to how glucose gets into different brain regions. It needs specific doors or transporters. Much of the brain cortex uses a transporter called GLUT3, which works pretty much independently of insulin.
Okay, so the cortex can get glucose even if insulin isn't working well.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
But the hippocampus, crucial for forming new memories, relies heavily on a different transporter, GLUT4.
And GLUT4 is different.
Critically different. GLUT4 transporters are highly insulin dependent. They need insulin to signal them to come to the cell surface and let glucose in.
Ah, I see. So if there's insulin resistance or just not enough effective insulin within the brain environment.
Those GLUT4 doors stay closed. The hippocampus can't get the glucose it needs, even if there's plenty of it floating around in the blood. It leads to what's called hypometabolism, reduced energy use in those key memory areas.
And you can actually see this on scans.
Yes, an FDG PET scan, which measures glucose uptake, will often show this characteristic pattern of reduced activity in the hippocampus and related regions in Alzheimer's patients. The brain is literally running on empty right where it needs energy most for memory.
Okay, so if glucose isn't getting in effectively, that makes the other fuel source, ketones, incredibly important.
Absolutely vital. This is where Dr. Ben Bickman's work on ketones comes in. He highlights how ketones, particularly the main one, beta-hydroxybutyrate or BHB, serve as a highly efficient backup fuel when glucose metabolism is compromised.
Like after a brain injury, maybe.
Yeah.
Or in chronic conditions like Alzheimer's.
Both. Ketones are particularly useful in situations of high energy demand or impaired glucose use. And Dr. Bickman points out that BHB is much more than just an alternative fuel source. It has multiple beneficial effects.
Such as?
Well, first, it crosses the blood-brain barrier very easily, so it can get to where it's needed. Second, it helps sustain mitochondrial function, the energy factories in our cells. But, importantly, BHB also acts as a signaling molecule.
Signaling. What is a signal?
It signals resilience. It reduces oxidative stress by boosting the production of our own internal antioxidant enzymes. And critically, it helps control inflammation.
How does it control inflammation? That seems key for Alzheimer's.
It does this in part by inhibiting something called the NLRP3 inflammasome. This is a molecular complex inside cells that drives a lot of chronic inflammation. By dampening it down, ketones can help cool off the inflammatory fire in the brain.
So they provide fuel, protect mitochondria, boost antioxidants, and reduce inflammation. That's quite a package.
It really is. It explains why strategies to increase ketone levels, whether through diet or exogenous ketone supplements, can be so beneficial.
Is there direct evidence ketones actually reach the brain in humans when needed?
Yes, absolutely. Dr. Bickman mentioned research by Bernini and colleagues from 2018. They used a technique called cerebral microdialysis in patients who had suffered traumatic brain injuries.
What did they find?
They found that when ketone levels were elevated in the blood, those ketones readily crossed into the injured brain tissue. It provides a very strong scientific rationale for using ketones therapeutically, not just preventatively, especially perhaps for people who find a strict ketogenic diet difficult to maintain.
Right. Exogenous ketones could offer a way to get some of those benefits without the dietary restriction. Okay, so that covers fuel. What about managing appetite and intake? GLP-1 drugs are huge now.
They are, and they represent a new paradigm. But Dr. Karan Rajan reminds us we have powerful internal systems for regulating appetite, involving hormones like GLP-1, CCK, and leptin, and we can influence these naturally through diet.
What kind of foods?
He emphasizes the power trio: fiber, protein, and healthy fats. Fiber adds bulk and feeds gut bacteria. Protein is inherently satiating. And healthy fats trigger the release of cholecystokinin, or CCK.
CCK, what does that do?
CCK does a couple of important things. It slows down how quickly food leaves your stomach, making you feel full for longer. And it sends direct signals of satiety, of fullness to your brain.
So fats help you feel satisfied.
The right fats, yes. And Dr. Rajan highlighted a specific study that really illustrates this. It was published in the Journal of Research in Medical Sciences.
What did it show?
They took participants, put them on a reduced calorie diet for 3 months, but one group was specifically told to include almonds every day.
Almonds, a source of healthy fats and fiber.
Exactly. And the results were striking. The almond group lost significantly more weight, in fact, twice as much weight on average compared to the group on the same calorie diet but without almonds.
Twice as much weight just by adding almonds.
Yes. And importantly, the almond group also showed greater improvements in insulin sensitivity and their natural GLP-1 levels. It shows how specific food choices can powerfully impact these hormonal satiety systems.
That's a great practical example. What about his point on spice? That was interesting.
It was. He made the point that spice isn't just a taste. It's more complex, a perception involving smell, touch receptors in the mouth, even memory.
A feeling as much as a taste.
Right. And relevant to satiety, spicy foods also stimulate CCK release, that fullness hormone we just talked about. Plus, the complexity of spices, like the chili salt mix his grandmother used, potentially encourages a more diverse gut microbiome, so it connects taste, satiety, and gut health.
Fascinating. Now, another dietary area often surrounded by confusion is dairy. Dr. David Ludwig and Dr. Elizabeth Boham had some counterintuitive points here.
They really challenged the conventional wisdom, particularly the idea that drinking lots of milk as a child guarantees strong bones and fewer fractures later in life.
That's what we're always told, isn't it? Calcium for strong bones.
It is. But Dr. Ludwig points out a potential downside. High milk consumption can accelerate growth in childhood, leading to greater adult height. And statistically, increased height is actually a risk factor for fractures.
Because?
As he put it simply, the bigger they come, the harder they fall. A taller person falling potentially experiences greater impact force.
Huh. I had never thought of it that way.
And it aligns with some surprising international data. Countries with the lowest dairy consumption often have the lowest rates of osteoporosis and fractures. It suggests the link isn't as straightforward as more milk equals stronger bones.
Okay, that's about fracture risk. What about digestive issues? Lactose intolerance?
Dr. Elizabeth Boham added important clinical nuance here. She stressed that lactose intolerance isn't always something you're born with. It can develop at any age.
What might trigger it later in life?
Often, it follows some kind of major gut disruption, like a bad bout of food poisoning, gastroenteritis, or even a strong course of antibiotics that disrupts the gut microbiome and might damage the intestinal lining where the lactase enzyme is produced.
That enzyme needed to digest lactose.
Exactly. And she shared a very typical patient story. Someone suffering for ages with chronic diarrhea, gas, bloating, usually starting half an hour to 2 hours after eating.
Classic IBS-type symptoms.
Yes, often misdiagnosed as IBS. But without doing expensive tests, the simple intervention was just to remove all dairy from the diet.
And the result?
Within a week, 5 to 7 days, the symptoms completely resolved. It's a powerful example of the elimination diet approach that she and Dr. Mark Hyman often recommend. If you suspect a food, try removing it strictly for a few weeks and see what happens.
It's the simplest diagnostic tool, really. For those who find dairy is an issue but still want some, did she suggest alternatives?
She did. Options that are often better tolerated include A2 milk, which has a different type of casein protein. Also, fermented dairy, like good quality yogurt or kefir, where the lactose is partially broken down by bacteria. Or switching to goat's or sheep's milk, which have slightly different structures.
Right, so we've covered cognitive architecture and metabolic fuel supply. But our mental state, our experience of distress, profoundly shapes our physical health too. Let's move into that, starting with chronic pain.
Okay.
Dr. Daniel Amen has a really different take on this.
He does. His perspective is quite radical. Chronic pain, he argues, is often less about the actual physical damage in the body and more about abnormal stuck activity patterns in the brain.
More about the brain's interpretation of signals than the signals themselves.
In many cases, yes. He points to the well-known finding that maybe 80% of older adults could have visibly abnormal lumbar spines on an MRI scan, bulging discs, degeneration, yet experience absolutely no back pain at all.
Which proves the image doesn't always correlate with the experience of pain.
Exactly. The pain experience is constructed in the brain. And his clinical stories really illustrate this. He talks about a police officer who'd had 6 back surgeries.
6 surgeries.
Yes, and was still in such unrelenting pain that he had actually attempted suicide. The pain had completely consumed his life.
That's devastating. What did Dr. Amen's team do?
They scanned his brain using SPECT imaging, focusing not just on sensory areas, but on the emotional and attentional networks related to suffering. They identified overactivity in his anterior cingulate gyrus, a key part of the brain's suffering pathway.
The part that makes pain feel awful and grabs your attention.
Precisely. They used targeted interventions, neurofeedback, perhaps medication, lifestyle changes to calm down that specific brain region. And the patient's report afterwards was fascinating.
What did he say?
He said, "I still hurt, but I don't think about it all the time."
Ah, so the physical sensation might have still been there, but the suffering, the emotional weight, and constant focus on it had dramatically reduced.
Exactly. They unhooked the pain from the suffering circuit. It highlights how much of chronic pain's burden is neurological and psychological.
Dr. Amen describes this as a kind of doom loop, doesn't he?
Yes, he uses the acronym PHAIN to describe it. Pain itself triggers hyperexcitability in those suffering pathways, which generates alarming information, negative thoughts, catastrophic thinking, doom talk about the pain. This in turn creates negative muscle tension, which often physically worsens the pain, starting the cycle all over again.
A vicious cycle. Pain leading to worry, leading to tension, leading back to more pain.
Exactly, and breaking that loop is key. He suggests various ways, things like biofeedback to learn to control physiological responses, deep diaphragmatic breathing to calm the nervous system, specific psychological techniques like havening, which uses touch.
And even simple things like journaling.
Yes, particularly rage journaling. Just getting the frustration and anger out onto paper, uncensored, can apparently be incredibly effective at releasing that pent-up emotional energy tied to the pain without acting it out physically.
Interesting. And he also drew a link between common exposures and brain changes related to anxiety.
He did, referencing some concerning recent animal studies on the artificial sweetener aspartame.
What did they find?
In mice, consuming aspartame led to hyperexcitability in the amygdala, the brain's fear and anxiety center. It established a potential biological mechanism linking this common additive to generalized anxiety symptoms.
Okay, that's worrying in itself. But there was more, wasn't there?
Yes, the really unsettling part was the finding that this effect appeared to be epigenetic.
Meaning it affected gene expression, not the DNA sequence itself.
Correct. And crucially, the anxiety phenotype, the tendency towards anxiety and the amygdala hyperexcitability was passed down to the offspring of the mice that consumed aspartame and even to the grand offspring.
Even though those later generations never consumed aspartame themselves.
That's right. It suggests the exposure in one generation could have lasting consequences across multiple generations through epigenetic changes.
That is deeply concerning. It really underscores the potential long-term impact of environmental toxins and food additives.
It absolutely does. It highlights the need for much greater vigilance.
Okay, shifting from anxiety triggers to dealing with fear and trauma itself. Dr. Andrew Huberman offered some useful distinctions here.
Yes, he provided a really clear definition. Fear is the normal adaptive response to a present threat. It's designed to keep us safe. Trauma, on the other hand, is essentially fear that's gotten stuck.
Stuck how?
It's become maladaptively embedded in the nervous system, so the fear response keeps getting triggered even when the original threat is long gone, or by things only loosely associated with it.
And he explained the biology behind the stress response.
He did, outlining the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This is the core system. The hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which signals the adrenal glands on top of the kidneys.
They release stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol.
Exactly. There's a fast pathway involving adrenaline for immediate fight or flight, and a slower pathway involving cortisol. It's this slower cortisol release that can create what he called the long tail of fear.
The long tail.
Meaning the physiological effects, the heightened alertness, the changes in metabolism, the altered gene expression driven by cortisol can linger long after the stressful event is over. This is how trauma can become biologically embedded.
So how do you unstick that fear? How do you deal with trauma according to this model?
Dr. Huberman made a really crucial point. You don't really eliminate a fear memory. Instead, you replace or overlay it. Fear extinction isn't erasure, it's new learning.
How does that work neurologically?
He explained that the amygdala, that fear center, has strong connections to the brain's dopamine system. The system involved in reward, motivation, and learning positive associations.
So you can link new positive associations to old traumatic memories.
Essentially, yes.
Uh,
Through conscious effort, through therapy, he mentioned prolonged exposure therapy as an example, you can use cognition and narrative to tack on feelings of safety, control, or accomplishment to the old memory. You're effectively retraining the brain's response to those triggers.
Rewiring the associations.
Precisely. Replacing the fear response with a neutral or even positive one over time.
Okay, that's dealing with embedded fear. But what about our basic mental hardware, like memory? Jim Peto argues most memory problems aren't about a broken brain.
That's his core message. It's usually not a broken brain, it's an untrained brain. We simply haven't learned how to use our memory effectively.
What's the mistake most of us make?
We rely on passive repetition, just reading something over and over or saying a name repeatedly in our heads. Rote memorization.
And that doesn't work well.
Not very well, no. Because, as Kwik points out, our brains aren't really designed to remember dry, abstract information through repetition alone. The brain thrives on meaning, emotion, novelty, and especially vividness.
Things that stand out.
Exactly. Information that's connected to something sensory or emotional gets prioritized.
So what's the solution? If repetition doesn't work, what does?
It's elegantly simple. Visualization and association. You have to actively create a memorable link.
Give me an example. Say you meet someone named Mr. Baker.
Right. Repeating Baker, Baker, Baker in your head is passive and boring for the brain. Instead, Kwik says, you create a vivid, maybe even absurd, mental image. You could picture Mr. Baker wearing a giant, fluffy white baker's hat. Maybe he's juggling loaves of bread. Maybe he smells strongly of yeast. The more sensory details, the more unusual the image, the more likely your brain is to tag it as important and remember it.
Connect the name to a strong visual and sensory hook.
Exactly. You're translating boring data into the language the brain understands: pictures, feelings, connections.
And he offered a simple process for doing this.
Yes, a 4-step method. First, pay attention. Be truly present when you encounter the information. You can't remember what you never really registered in the first place.
Makes sense. Step 2.
Create that vivid image. Use visualization and association, make it active, maybe humorous, involve your senses.
Step 3.
Review briefly. This is critical. Later that day, just quickly recall the image and the associated information. This strengthens the neural pathway you just created. Spaced repetition, but of the vivid image, not just the dry fact.
On the final step.
Apply it everywhere. Practice using this technique for names, shopping lists, study material, presentations. Like any skill, the more you use it, the better and faster you get. It builds not just memory, but cognitive confidence.
Okay, we've talked about cognitive regeneration. Let's broaden out to physical regeneration and longevity. The field of regenerative medicine is moving incredibly fast. Dr. Harry Adelson and Amy Killen discussed stem cell therapies.
Yes, particularly the use of allogeneic stem cells, meaning cells derived from donated birth tissue, like umbilical cords, for more systemic, full-body makeover type treatments.
Why allogeneic rather than autologous, using the patient's own stem cells from fat or bone marrow?
They argued that for general anti-aging or addressing systemic wear and tear, allogeneic cells might have advantages. Firstly, they are naive.
Meaning young and undamaged.
Exactly. They haven't accumulated the potential DNA damage, epigenetic changes, or inflammatory signaling that an older person's own cells might have. They're arguably more potent and vibrant. Plus, harvesting them is non-invasive for the recipient.
That makes sense.
Right.
But there are concerns about unregulated clinics, aren't there?
Huge concerns. Both Dr. Adelson and Amy Killen were very clear about this. They stressed the absolute necessity of using products from highly regulated, reputable sources. They mentioned working with U.S. facilities like Vidi Labs, for example.
What makes them different?
These facilities use umbilical cord tissue products registered under specific FDA regulations 361 HCTP. This means there's rigorous testing for infectious diseases, proper handling protocols, and full traceability of the tissue back to the donor. It provides a crucial layer of safety and quality control that's often missing in international clinics.
So buyer beware if considering these therapies. Due diligence on the source is critical.
Absolutely paramount. But they also made another really vital point. Stem cells aren't magic bullets on their own.
What do you mean?
They emphasize that the soil needs to be fertile for the seeds to grow. If the recipient's body is a metabolic mess, highly inflamed, insulin-resistant, full of toxins, the stem cells simply won't be able to do their job effectively.
You have to optimize the environment first.
Yes, and after the procedure, specific protocols can help maximize the results. They mentioned two key adjunct therapies.
Which are?
Red light therapy, also known as photobiomodulation. Specific wavelengths of red and near-infrared light can help stimulate stem cell activity, encouraging them to mobilize and proliferate.
Okay, and the second one?
Hyperbaric oxygen therapy, or HBOT. This involves breathing pure oxygen in a pressurized chamber. It dramatically increases the amount of oxygen dissolved in the blood and tissues.
Why is that helpful?
Oxygen is crucial for healing and cellular energy production. HBOT essentially floods the body with oxygen, creating an optimal environment for the newly introduced stem cells to engraft, survive, and thrive, promoting tissue repair.
So it's a synergistic approach.
Yeah.
Fix the underlying health issues, introduce high-quality cells, and then support them with things like light and oxygen.
That's the comprehensive strategy.
Now, tying this back to the root causes, Dr. Breetzen revisited that concept of evolutionary mismatch, specifically regarding the APOE4 gene.
Yes, he really hammered home that APOE4, which is strongly associated with increased Alzheimer's risk in modern populations, was likely highly advantageous for most of human history.
Advantageous how? It's pro-inflammatory, right?
It is generally pro-inflammatory, and that was probably the point. For 96% of human evolution, our ancestors faced constant threats from infections, parasites causing leaky gut, and periods of famine. A robust, rapid inflammatory response would have been critical for survival.
So APOE4 help fight off bugs and heal wounds faster.
Plausibly, yes. And it might also help manage cholesterol differently during starvation. He mentioned the Tsimane people in the Amazon, a modern hunter-gatherer group where APOE4 doesn't seem to confer the same Alzheimer's risk, presumably because their environment and lifestyle still match what the gene evolved for.
But take that same gene and put it in our modern Western environment.
Which is often sedentary, high in processed foods, low in fiber, full of chronic stress, environmental toxins, microplastics, and that pro-inflammatory tendency flips from being protective against acute threats to being chronically destructively activated.
Driving the very conditions, like Alzheimer's, it might have once protected against.
Exactly. It's shortening what Dr. Breetzen calls our brain span. The mismatch is key.
So the solution isn't to change our genes, but to change our environment and lifestyle to better suit our ancient genome.
Precisely. Mitigate the mismatch. And Dr. Breetzen distills his comprehensive protocol down to 7 core lifestyle pillars to achieve this.
Can you quickly list them?
Sure. Number 1, diet. Specifically, a plant-rich, mildly ketogenic approach he calls Keto Flex 1233. That 123 refers to a minimum 12-hour overnight fast and finishing eating at least 3 hours before bed.
Okay. 2.
Exercise. A combination of high-intensity interval training, HIIT, for metabolic benefits and strength training for muscle mass and insulin sensitivity.
3.
Sleep. Prioritizing 7-8 hours, optimizing sleep quality to allow the brain's glymphatic waste clearance system to work. The fasting window helps here too.
4.
Stress management. Finding effective techniques, whether meditation, yoga, time in nature, deep breathing, brain training. Keeping the brain active and challenged with new learning, games, puzzles, detoxification. Minimizing exposure to toxins, pesticides, heavy metals, mold, microplastics, and supporting the body's detox pathways through things like sauna use, adequate fiber, hydration.
And finally, 7.
Targeted supplements. Based on individual testing, that cognoscopy we talked about, to address specific deficiencies or imbalances in nutrients, hormones, etc.
It sounds comprehensive, but also manageable, broken down like that. 7 key areas.
It provides a clear framework. And within that, we need to remember sensory input too.
What do you mean?
Dr. Isaacson made a striking point about hearing loss. He cited data suggesting that untreated hearing loss could account for as much as 8% of all dementia cases worldwide.
8%. Just from hearing loss. No.
Think about it. If you're constantly straining to hear, your brain is diverting huge cognitive resources just to process degraded auditory signals. That leaves less bandwidth for memory, attention, and other executive functions. Plus, hearing loss often leads to social isolation, another known dementia risk factor.
So treating hearing loss isn't just about hearing better. It could actually protect your brain.
That's the implication, and Dr. Breetzen shared an anecdote supporting this, an APOE4 patient who saw significant cognitive improvement simply by getting properly fitted hearing aids. It reduced the cognitive load.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the interventions are simpler than we think.
Yeah.
Addressing basic sensory function matters.
Absolutely. Don't neglect the fundamentals.
Okay, we've covered the physical and cognitive architecture. Let's turn finally to the more philosophical side. Living a life of meaning and minimizing regret. This brings us to Bronnie Ware.
Yes, her work, listening to people at the very end of their lives, is incredibly poignant and insightful. Her book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, really focuses on how confronting our mortality can help us live more fully now, adding life to our years, not just years to our life.
What was the number one regret she heard most often?
Overwhelmingly it was. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
Wow, that hits hard. So many people feeling they lived according to external expectations.
Yes. Fear of judgment, fear of disappointing family, fear of not fitting in. These pressures lead people to suppress their own dreams and desires. Ware says the antidote is consciously tuning in to your own heart, listening to that inner voice.
And she mentioned scheduling space.
Yes, space is medicine, she said. We need to deliberately create pauses in our busy routines, moments of quiet reflection, to actually hear that inner voice and break free from the autopilot that makes life fly by unnoticed.
That makes sense. What was the second major regret?
I wish I hadn't worked so hard.
I think many people can relate to feeling that pressure.
Oh, almost universally, Ware found, particularly among men of that generation. They regretted missing their children's youth, missing time with their partners, sacrificing health and relationships for their careers.
It's the classic time versus money trade-off, isn't it?
Exactly. And at the end of life, people consistently value time and connection far above money or professional achievements. Ware stresses that work is necessary, but it shouldn't become our entire identity or sole source of validation. Healthy boundaries are crucial.
We need energy for other parts of life, too.
Yes, we're better humans and probably better workers, too, when we have that balance.
What was the third regret? This one sounded particularly sad.
It is perhaps the most heartbreaking. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings.
Holding back emotions.
Yes, people suppressing their true feelings, love, anger, sadness, forgiveness, often to keep the peace or avoid confrontation. But this bottling up leads to bitterness, resentment, and often physical illness. And it creates profound loneliness.
Loneliness, even when surrounded by people.
Especially then. Ware told the story of Joseph, a 91-year-old man who was dying. His wife and family were in complete denial about his condition. They refused to talk about death, wanting to keep things positive.
Oh no, so he couldn't talk to them about what he was going through.
He couldn't. The only person he could openly discuss his fears, his feelings about dying, and his final wishes with was Bronnie Ware herself, his paid caregiver, because she was the only one willing to listen without shutting him down or changing the subject.
That's incredibly isolating.
Yeah.
To face the end of your life unable to share your deepest truths with your loved ones because they can't handle it.
It illustrates the terrible cost of unspoken feelings and our cultural discomfort with death. That forced silence is a huge source of regret.
Did Ware observe qualities in people who seemed more content at the end, who had fewer regrets?
She did. She noted 3 recurring themes among those who navigated their final weeks and months with more peace. A good sense of humor, healthy family communication where feelings could be expressed, and some form of faith, not necessarily religious, but a belief in something beyond the physical self, providing comfort and perspective.
Humor seems especially important, doesn't it? Maintaining lightness.
Hugely underrated, she felt. It keeps connections alive, eases tension, and helps maintain perspective even in the face of immense difficulty. #outro. So if we try and weave all these threads together, from Dr. Bridson's 36 holes to Bronnie Ware's regrets, what's the big picture? I think the overwhelming theme is agency, real profound agency.
Agency. You mean control.
Yes, the understanding that we have far more power than we often realize to influence our health trajectory. We've seen evidence that you can literally change your brain's structure through personalized interventions. You can dial down chronic pain signals by retraining brain pathways. You can shape the emotional quality of your life and ultimately your legacy by living more consciously.
It's incredibly empowering. We've seen how optimizing the physical system's getting the metabolism right, with things like the keto flex diet, dealing with ketones, tackling insulin resistance, detoxing from things like aspartame or microplastics, directly impacts mental clarity and reduces physical suffering.
Absolutely. And the reverse is also true. Managing our internal world, learning to express feelings constructively, maybe through journaling, like Dr. Amen suggests, using humor, cultivating connection, addressing trauma, like Dr. Huberman described, that profoundly affects our physical state, our inflammation levels, our stress hormones, our overall health span. It's all interconnected.
Mind and body are one system.
Fundamentally.
You mentioned Dr. Isaacson earlier, and he had that very simple, almost stark rule related to metabolic health, the ELF diet. Eat less food.
Ah, yes. Simple, but maybe not easy.
Maybe not. But considering the sheer breadth of everything we've discussed today, from complex biochemical pathways and stem cells to the deep importance of expressing feelings, perhaps we can leave our listeners with a thought inspired by that simplicity.
Okay.
Given all the possible interventions, all the things you could do, what is the single easiest thing you could choose to cut out of your life, starting this week? It could be a food that you know isn't serving you. It could be a negative thought pattern you keep looping on. It could be saying yes to something out of obligation when you want to say no.
Just one small thing to eliminate.
Yes. What's one small subtraction you could make that might just start that ripple effect? That first step towards taking back agency and moving towards that more optimal, connected, and vital life we've been exploring. Something simple to get the ball rolling.